for this one, the author of one of my favorite books, The Vegetarian Myth, which I've sent to probably dozens of our patients now. And I get this question all of the time. Should I be eating meats? Is it good for me? Why not? We had one patient, young girl, and we looked at her bloods and she was anemic and had macrocytic anemia and all these issues. She said, what do I supplement with? And I said, steak. And so we get it all the time, and it's a really interesting topic. And I came past your book. I was walking through a bookstore in Montreal, and I was just kind of going through the health section. I saw it and it said The Vegetarian Myth. And I thought that was a really compelling title because I can see how a vegan and a plant-based diet is compelling to many people, right? Like most people that do it are not bad people. It's not that they're out there and they're hoping to save more animals, hoping to save their health, hoping to eat better and make better choices. But unfortunately, it's not that simple. How did you come up with the title?
It was just obvious to me from the beginning that that's what I wanted to call it, like pretty much from page one. My publisher wasn't super psyched about it, but I really stuck to my guns. And then it turned out that I was correct, because I think most people have a reaction like yours, that this book is going to be something totally different and probably something that you either are going to hate or really want to read, but either way, it's engaging. So, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a really, really great book, and I love that it's separated into the sections of health, environment, and the different topics, and you address the different topics. But yeah, what's your story with veganism? What happened?
Yeah. So, first of all, this is my dog.
Oh.
She's helping, and she likes to be on these interviews. She has one thing to say to everybody, which is eat meat. Anyway,
Yeah.
I should have listened to her. I was 16 years old, and I was a very engaged and curious teenager. I was very concerned about the state of the planet, about cruelty and issues of injustice and all of sadism, and why were we wrecking everything, and why was there racism, and why was there sexism, and I was just absolutely inflamed about all of this. And I met another teenage girl her whole family were vegans, and that's actually the number one way that people take up vegetarianism or veganism, is by meeting somebody who's already doing it and they are convinced. So I was definitely convinced. She had all the information. At that point, we didn't have the internet back then, but all the brochures, the little booklets and everything, and told me what to read. And I was just enthralled immediately. Thought she had to be right about all of this. And some of it is, still quite compelling. I mean, when you see those pictures of the factory farmed animals and really horrible conditions that they're in, I mean, that should yank at everybody's heart because it's horrible. But all of it, it makes a really complete picture, and it's very easy, right? Like if you just do this one thing, take out all the animal products, you can save the planet, save animals, save your health, save all the starving people. All you have to do is one thing. So it wasn't extremely compelling, and within a week, that was it. I was done. I was going to be a vegan, so I went in, just dove in head first. I was all of it. Like this was going to be what I was. So, and I did it for 20 years. So that was me. And
That's a long time.
It was, it's permanent damage at that point. You can't do it that long and not end up with some real problems. So I, one by one, just sort of wrecked each part of my body, not realizing, of course, that was the issue, because when you're in vegan world, you're not allowed to think that way. So it's got some very cult-like elements, and that's part of the problem. It's a very fundamentalist worldview, and if you are, any kind of a fanatic, which I certainly was, it's a hard road out. You have to really be hurting before you'll consider getting out, and it was hard. So that day finally came for me, like it does for everyone, and it's not a fun process getting out, but eventually I did the right thing for myself, and I learned a whole bunch more. It was so much information that I didn't have and that I wasn't willing to consider. And one of the good things about getting out was finally being able to engage with so much more information out there. And that really helped. Like, well, I'm not actually doing a terrible thing here. In fact, if I do this correctly, I'm doing the right thing for everybody. So all of that came later, though. At first, it was, it's a hard day. You decide
Yeah.
you have to give it up.
I remember in your book, you told the story of watching soil and kind of trying to grow your own plants. And that was,
Yeah.
in the book at least, your aha moment. Was that the moment where you went, I can't do this anymore?
Well, the moment for me was really about my physical health, but growing my own food presented a huge array of problems that could not be solved as a vegan. So I really hit the wall ideologically for that sort of 2, 3, 4 years while I was doing all of that, because there was no way out. The moment that you start trying to grow your own garden, you've got these problems. One of the first one is that there's plenty of animals that want to eat your food, and you have to figure out what to do about it. And there's no good way through that as a vegan. And that includes a lot of insects. Insects are animals. And it was hard. It was really hard, and I couldn't bring myself to kill them. So I ended up having to abandon the garden more than once because I just couldn't do it. And there was definitely a moment, and I just remember this so clearly still. So I kept planting lettuce, and then the slugs did every single night, and then I would buy more, put the little starts in, slugs would come back. It was every single night I was having this problem. And the sort of organic way to deal with slugs, I mean, you can poison them, but that's going to just bioaccumulate up the food chain. I wasn't going to do that. But, one of the best organic cures is beer. You put out little dishes of beer, and they love it. They're drawn to it. They drink it. They drown. They get drunk and they're dead. I mean, so I guess they die happy, but they do have to die.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll do it. I was at my wit's end. And so I put out the little saucers, and I woke up at 2 a.m. and it's just a cold sweat. Like, what am I doing? I'm killing animals. I'm not that person. I don't want to do this. And I ran outside and I saved all the slugs, and it was over. I was like, well, now I just have to accept that I'm not going to have a huge chunk of this garden because they're just going to keep eating it. But it was like this huge relief for about 12 hours. Like, okay, I don't have to. I don't have to be the person that kills animals. I can go back to being, the super duper vegan that would never hurt a living creature. And I went to the grocery store, and I'll just buy lettuce. It's so simple. And I stood there in that grocery store, and I'm holding that, like, literally it's in my hand. And it was like this moment of just feeling yourself grow up. Because having tried it, I knew, and there was no way back. I knew that whoever grew that lettuce killed those slugs. A whole bunch of animals died for that farmer to grow that lettuce, and I was fooling myself to pretend that there were not dead animals embodied in that lettuce. So for me to have that lettuce, animals had to die, and I could go on pretending that it wasn't true, and I could pay other people to do it for me, but there were dead animals in that lettuce. There's no way to get that lettuce without killing something. And it was a terrible moment, and it was also a bracing moment, and it was a good moment, because it was like you just have to accept that is the basic arithmetic of life. You are happy to be alive. Every single creature eats something. For something to live, something else has to die. And if you accept that, you can do it well. It's the only way forward. It's the only way to be a responsible grown-up person and take responsibility for what your life is going to consume. And all of that happened at once, like holding that lettuce in the grocery store. And it really was just this absolute turning point for me of just setting aside, those childish things that my life could be this fairy tale where no animals were ever hurt for me to live. But it was hard, and it was a long build up to that point, because I tried and tried and tried. And the other thing that becomes really apparent, especially if you're going to try to grow organically and preserve your soil and all of this, is that plants want to eat dead animals. Like, there's no way around that. You want good soil. You have to apply certain things, and it's blood meal, bone meal, like all of this, manure, all of that has to go in. And it was just ghastly for me. I just, I'd go to the store and look on, in the catalogs, whatever, try to figure it out. Isn't there some way to do this as a vegan? And the answer really is no. It's like, well, I can buy mineral, like rock powder instead of bone meal or blood meal. But like, who are you fooling? Like, where does that come from? It's mined, and there's no way to do that without fossil fuel. How are you going to
Mm,
grind rock without like massive equipment? Like, you don't even need to explain to me what that equipment is called. I know this is a massive dose of fossil fuel. Nothing about this is
mm,
going to be sustainable. On the other hand, there's blood meal and bone meal. Like,
yeah.
these are byproducts from people eating animals. Like, well, but I don't want to do that. And so, it was just this terrible thing. And I had friends who had goats and they had a barn and it was filled with manure. And they're like, well, we'll bring you some manure. So I did that. But it was like this sort of, I'm sort of shifting the line at this point about what can I still call this vegan food? Like, I see no other option because there honestly isn't one. But all right, they have the goats. I'm not the person that's oppressing the poor goats. They're doing that. I'm just sort of getting this byproduct that's the manure, and I'll still call this vegan. But it was already collapsing. Like, I was already learning way too much about where food comes from, the nature of agriculture, like what is this food actually, and where it comes from, what dies for it. And none of these were vegan answers. And it was tough. It was a bunch of really hard years. Eventually I got chickens. Um, they took care of the bugs for me. It was absolutely phenomenal. Like, that's what they do. They eat bugs. They had a great time, and I had beautiful soil as a result and plants that lived. But it wasn't easy, not easy as a vegan to have to face any of this. And, eventually the whole thing collapsed. But I did try. Like, I pushed this to the absolute limit, like everywhere that I could. And there's
Mm.
just that, you just have to let it go eventually. There's no way to do it without just reality.
Yeah, I love in your book where you kind of point out your own cognitive dissonance at the time, where you were like,
Yeah.
I thought this would work, but then it didn't. And you kept kind of finding different ways to justify why it might work. Um, it was a really big aha moment for me in your book when you pointed out that plants eat animals.
Yeah.
Last night, we were actually watching a video of a Venus flytrap.
Hmm.
And it traps a bug and then it kind of
Yeah.
glues it and then it releases all these acids and dissolves it, which is like the most brutal way to murder something, right? And this is a
I don't
plant.
think that's a good way to go.
Yeah, and this is a plant, right? And plants have their own protective. Everything in nature is about survival, right? And so
Yeah.
they can't run away from you. They can't attack back, and so they release chemicals and they prick you and they cause rashes and goitrogens and attack the thyroid and attack so many things. And this is what plants do. So they're not inherently just good for us because they're a plant. Like with everything, there needs to be some balance, right?
Yeah. Well, like, tomatoes, that seems like a vegan food, but,
Mm,
tomatoes along their stem, they have little tiny, tiny thorns. They don't hurt us because they're so small, but if you think about how prickly a tomato stem feels, and
mm,
they, insects get stuck to that stem, and then the plant just like sucks the juice out of like literally just eats the insides out of slowly over
mm.
time. Once it's paled, that's what tomatoes do. Like,
So here's my question then. What, as a righteous vegan, right, believes
mhm.
this kind of ideology, what do you eat that doesn't involve death? Like, what can you eat that doesn't involve
You
death?
can't. That's the
What's the
thing. Like,
ultimate goal?
there's nothing left to eat. And I remember, learning about fruitarians. Like, well, they just eat the fruit because, plants, various like apple trees, they make apples, and that fruit wants to be eaten because then we transport the seeds. And so that's, there are plants that have done that. They've made a bargain with other animals, either to get pollinated or to carry their seeds around with them somehow. And that's sort of the trade-off is, we'll make a sweet little package and now various
Mm,
animals will have it. And then you're going to take our seeds and poop them out somewhere and there'll be another apple tree. And, fair enough. That's a good bargain strike with animals. But, having tried to grow fruit trees, they need minerals, big time. And
mm,
where are you going to get them? Like, it's just, I know where those come from. You're either going to get the ground up rocks that, vast quantities of fossil fuel and mining, or you want a real closed loop. Yeah, you're going to be using dead animals to do that. That's what
mm.
goes into an apple. And, again, that was really hard for me to face because, oh, what could be better than an apple? You're not even hurting the plant to eat it. They want to give you that fruit. Well, true enough, but, to make that fruit, they're eating some stuff that is not vegan. So
Yeah,
there's nothing. At the end of the day, there's nothing. And that's really even just one-on-one. That's not even talking like the
on
massive
scale.
destruction that agriculture has caused across the globe. And that, to me, that was the really like horrifying thing that I didn't want to face at the beginning, and that, you know,
And
I had to face
that's
ultimately. But yeah,
that's such a compelling topic as well, because I think industrial agriculture is a problem. I don't think that meat eating is a problem. I grew up on a, well, I didn't grow up on a farm, but my granddad owns a farm in Europe, and I was born there and lived there. And every summer we would go and I would watch him love his animals, and he still does. And he had
sure.
2 cows and 8 chickens and pigs and a little farm, and they kind of were self-sufficient for the most part.
Sure.
They didn't have a grocery store in that village until maybe 15 years ago.
Right.
And he managed to produce enough for his family and also
Right.
leave some milk on the front door so that the neighbor
Yep.
who grew potatoes could swap
Yep.
the milk, right?
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's how they lived. And they
Yep.
still do. And
Yep.
he managed to make that work without taking so much from the environment that he destroyed it.
Right.
And then
Right.
industrial agriculture came along.
Yeah.
And things started to go wrong. So the question that I have, or the argument that a lot of vegans will make is, well, the only reason we grow so much soy and wheat is to feed cattle so that people can eat cheeseburgers.
Nope, it's not true. Even with factory farming, which I think we can all agree is pretty horrible, they're only eating that what those animals are fed is only about 13% of it is actual grain that you or I might eat if we ate grain. The rest of it is either just straight up grass and leaves or what are called agricultural byproducts. So it's things that we can't eat. It's things we can't digest. I mean, I think we all know just instinctively that breakfast does not involve going outside and eating grass and leaves. Like that's not a thing humans can do, or we'd be doing it. That would be pretty easy. We can't digest that. We have no way to extract nutrients from that food. But cows can. Like lots of animals can. That's their place in, you know, whatever the food chain, whatever you want to call it. That's their part in the trophic pyramid. That's what they do is they eat cellulose and they turn it into their bodies, and we can't do that. So most of what they eat is stuff that we can't eat. So even if you want to accept, you know, just take as a given agriculture, you know, humans only want the tiny little seed on the wheat or the corn or the soy or whatever. The rest of that plant, the stalk, the leaves, whatever comes processed off of like the bran, the stuff that we don't want. What are you going to do with all that stuff? Well, the easiest thing to do with it is feed it to a cow because they can digest that, and they will turn it very nicely into milk and meat. And they can use, I think it's 0.6 kilograms of plant protein to make 1 kilogram of meat or milk. So it's a very useful conversion for everybody. That's what they do. So they're not generally in competition with things that humans eat. And I got sucked into that. I mean, I used to go around saying that all the time. Oh, it takes 18 pounds of corn to make it's just not true. Like that's not what they eat. That's not the quantity of it that they eat. And they shouldn't even be eating it at all. I mean, what cows are designed to eat is actually grass and nothing but. Like when they eat grain, it actually kills them if they do it for more than a few months. So even the worst factory farming situations for beef cattle, they still spend most of their time out, you know, on the range eating essentially grass. And then it's the last month or two of their lives when they're sent to quote fatten in the feedlots. That's when they're getting all that corn. But the corn kills them. I mean, it's way too acid for their stomachs. It's not an appropriate food for them. It like literally burns a hole in their stomach. And those, when they're sent to slaughter, I mean, they're very sick animals. They're being poisoned essentially. Their livers are all, you know, inflamed, and it's just such a bad thing to be feeding them corn. And we only do it for two reasons. And the first reason is that it makes them fat fast. So in terms of capitalism, there's profit to be made. But the underlying reason for all of this is honestly what's called the Green Revolution. Because starting in 1950, we started to produce this absolute mountain of surplus corn. And that was all because scientists had figured out how to make usable nitrogen out of fossil fuel, out of oil and gas. And with that kind of fossil fuel, and then they bred the plants to be super short, so they didn't waste much energy on the stem and the leaves, and they made the grain as big as it could conceivably get. Like those genomes have been pushed as far as they're going to go. You couldn't make them any shorter; they'll fall over. But what it meant was, with the input of fossil fuel, that this absolute mountain of surplus grain was created across the North American what used to be the prairie, that whole sort of breadbasket area, and this happened all around the globe. Now these crops take huge amounts of inputs. They take 4 times as much water. Obviously, you can't do it without all the fossil fuel, and what's created at the end of it is just a huge amount of cheap corn. That's suddenly where CAFOs, the confined animal feeding operations, that's where factory farming comes from. Before that, it didn't exist. It didn't make any economic sense to keep cows in mini cities and feed them corn. Like, nobody would have ever done that. But with corn that cheap, it suddenly made sense. And that's the only reason it became that cheap, was because of this whole industrial process. So they kind of put the cart before the horse when they say that, all of this is the problem with cows. It's like, no, the cows are being super mistreated. The only reason any of this happened was because of the fossil fuel and, the technological advancement of the Haber-Bosch process and figuring out how to extract that nitrogen. And it's been a disaster the world over. I mean, it's probably the worst thing that's happened to the planet.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
here we are. So, but it's it's not the cow's fault, and it's not the meat eater's fault. That's not how the political economy of any of this is working.
Yeah. And I mean, corn being subsidized, and here in Australia, wheat being government subsidized, and so much incentive for farmers to grow it, right? And so what do we do with that? And that's something that I learned, I think when I was like 19. I went to a butcher and I said, is your beef grass fed? I used to always try and find grass fed. He said, it is, but it's grain finished.
Right.
And he said, most beef is mostly grass fed and grain finished for those last 13 to 14 days. So when you watch these documentaries, A Game Changer and all these, I mean, every year there's a new vegan documentary that comes out.
Yeah.
And you see the kind of the brutal nature of factory farming. Of course, like as a human, you go, oh, that's I don't want to contribute to that, right? I don't want to participate. I don't want to contribute. But I find the people that go kind of hardcore vegan are the ones that are the most disconnected from food and animals. Like growing up with my granddad on the farm, I literally in front of my eyes saw him slaughter a pig for us. And we would then eat all of the pig.
Sure.
And then get a new pig and raise it and love it and then slaughter that pig. And you kind of, you see the damage that you're doing. So you want to contribute back to the environment and nature. And most people I find these days, especially in kind of our modern society, that go vegan are absolutely disconnected with that. Like they've never actually hunted for their food or seen an animal being raised. They've gone to the supermarket and bought the thing with the packet that says vegan and gluten-free and organic certified and assume that it comes from a good place.
They really have no idea. I mean, I definitely didn't. I just thought as long as there's not a dead animal on my plate, it has to be the good food. And I just could not have been more wrong. That when I finally understood the nature of agriculture, it was just like, this is a nightmare. And this is how we've wrecked the planet. It's the single most destructive thing that humans have done to planet Earth. Because what it is biotic cleansing. I mean, you take a piece of land and you clear every living thing off it. And I mean, down to the bacteria. And then you plant it just for humans. So all of those plants and animals have nowhere to go. So it's mass extinction. And that is what has happened around the globe. As of right now, every day, 200 species are going extinct, each and every day. That's 200 of our kin, plants and animals that will never come again, are being wiped out. And this is because we keep taking all the land. So that's problem number one, is the mass extinction, the biotic cleansing. And problem number two, that every time you do this, you are, of course, destroying the topsoil. So this is an inevitable problem, that you're using up your land. And then once you've turned it to desert, you then have to go out and get more land. Well, generally speaking, there's somebody else already living there. So that's why agricultural societies end up militarized, and they always do, because they have to conquer their neighbors and take their stuff after they've used up their own. And that's what a city is people living in densities such that they require the importation of resources. They have used up their own. They don't have anything left. It's all been paved or used or destroyed. So the food, the water, the energy, the trees, the fish, everything has to come from somewhere else. And that's the pattern of civilization, is you have this bloated power center, the city right in the middle, and then all the conquered colonies around it. eventually the entire thing collapses because, yeah, you can keep taking more, but eventually you're using that up too, because it's an inherently destructive process, soil especially. There have been 34 civilizations. Every last one of them has collapsed, and they last as long as the soil. So somewhere between 800 and 2,000 years, and then it's over. And the
Yeah,
last proteins in the cooking pots are human, which is to say, not pretty, but it ends with cannibalism when people are starving. That's the fate of every
absolutely.
civilization. So this one's not going to be any different. We extended it a whole bunch by adding fossil fuel, but all that happened was the human population quadrupled. Since 1950, that's what happened. So this problem's not going to go away. We've just made it 4 times worse.
I think it's such a shame that, the whole vegan versus carnivore and humans amongst each other have become the enemy, as in this group of people that eat this particular way is the enemy, when really we should all be fighting the common enemy,
I know.
which is
Yeah.
industrialized agriculture, destroying topsoil, destroying rainforests to plant, to
Palm
make
oil,
oil,
whatever.
palm
Yeah.
oil, to make freaking
Awful
vegan
stuff.
candy. Like
Yeah.
it's all insane. So I think absolutely, if we all come together and kind of deal with a common enemy, I think it would be much more efficient. I have a comment here that I want to address. Someone said, type A blood types are definitely better vegan. Most and every symptom I had went away and organs healed being vegan. Here's what I have to say about that. And, if you have a different opinion, please jump in. But anytime somebody goes away from a Western type of diet, whether it's vegan or carnivore, or they do some form of elimination, their body will go through a period where they essentially starve. And that has healing benefits. We recycle cells, we have better digestion, and things get better in the short term. And the longer you do it, like yourself, for 20 years, the more resources you kind of drain, the less metabolic resilience you have, and the sicker you become. Eventually, you start to eat yourself, which is where you start to get problems with muscle tissue, muscle wastage, thyroid issues, autoimmune issues, digestive problems. It becomes a shit show, to be honest. But in the short term, I think people experience a benefit with vegan diets and they go, I feel so much better. I have so much clarity. And it's because they've stopped eating as many calories, so they're starving a little bit and their brain is kicking in that survival mode and the body is recycling old cells and they get a healing benefit. But if you do it for long enough, I think you will absolutely run into some trouble.
Yeah, you're on nutritional drawdown. There's just way too many nutrients you can only get from animal products. Sad to say, that is the case. We evolved as carnivores. We did not evolve as plant eaters. We just don't have that kind of a digestive system. So, and you can store some of that for a while in your own tissues, but eventually the rubber's going to hit the road. You will drain them all out. There will be none left, and then you're going to end up with serious damage. So, I mean, I remember getting a letter from a doctor in Germany who's a neurologist, and he wrote me this really beautiful letter. Said that every single week he sees there are vegans who come to his office desperate for help, and they have permanently damaged either their sight or their hearing by being vegan. And he was so grateful for my book because it's the only way through. Is they really need to hear it from someone who's been there. And your book does a great job of, kind of helping them out. And he was just so pleased to have something to give them. But you could just tell he was so just sad, like just so sad for these people. Like, how you permanently damaged your eyesight doing this. Like, this didn't help anybody, and there's no way back from that. It's dreadful stuff. Like, I know it's what I did. I thought I was saving animals and saving the planet. And all I did was I gave myself 3 autoimmune diseases and I wrecked my spine. That's not coming back. So
what did you eat then and what do you eat now?
So I was like a super, super pure vegan. I didn't eat white flour. I wouldn't eat white sugar. It had to be whole grain, whole beans. And I mean, you have to remember, I started doing this in 1981. So a lot of the stuff that exists now for vegans didn't exist then. We didn't have all those weird little meat analog, like fake pepperoni and fake bacon and like the fake vegan cheeses. Like, none of that existed. So it was actually easier in some ways to be like a healthier vegan, because that stuff's just pure poison. All that. So I just don't even want to go near that. So, I mean, we mostly ate like rice and beans, and a lot of vegetables and some fruit. But, whether you call it sugar or not, it's mostly just sugar. And even though I wasn't eating white sugar, of course, the blood sugar problems get worse and worse and worse, like every week that you do that kind of diet. So, I mean, I ate an awful lot of sweet things. I thought it was okay because it was vegan and also not white sugar. It would be like maple syrup or some kind of whole, like a whole
Mm.
food kind of sugar. But it doesn't matter. And the thing that I really didn't understand was that, yeah, you can call it a complex carbohydrate and it might look like brown rice, but in your intestines, that is, of course, broken down into sugar. So
Absolutely, yeah.
it's all sugar at the end of the day. Like that's how it's absorbed into your body. It has to be broken down into something really small to get through the brush border and into your bloodstream. And that's what your
Mm.
body does. So, yeah, I mean, it might be slightly better if it's a whole grain, but it's just sugar at the end of the day. So that's
Well,
what I was eating. But I was like super, super pure about it. I mean, I wouldn't even eat like jelly or ketchup if it had sugar in it. Like I only buy very
mm.
specific brands. I was like trying to be so good, and it didn't matter. Like, I mean, it was just I still blew through my insulin receptors. I
And
ended up like
that's the thing.
super hypoglycemic.
A lot of
Yeah.
vegans make that argument, like, you're not doing it right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And every time you admit how bad you feel, it's like, well, just double down and do it more, and maybe try a fast for 3 days or wheatgrass juice. And I'm like, oh, it's ridiculous. You just
Mm.
have to face the facts. So that was hard. And the other thing for me that was, I mean, I was the last holdout really in my friendship circle. There were like everybody before me had already kind of given it up, and not everybody had admitted it, but once I finally said, okay, I can't do this anymore, I'm just telling you all I'm done with this. And there were all these people in my life who were like, yeah, I've been eating meat every morning for years now. I just didn't want to
Yeah,
tell you.
didn't
And,
want to tell anyone.
like they just really, it's not worth, the struggle session that you're going to have to endure at that point. But I was amazed how many people, some of them had been quite upfront with me. They're like, I'm just telling you what I'm doing and take it or leave it. And I was like, no, you can't give up. You could still be a vegan. You just have to try harder. And they're like, dude, I've been trying for a decade. I feel terrible. And I'm eating fish and I feel dramatically better. And honestly, you would too. And I was like, no, I can't ever do that. So,
Mm.
it's hard. It's a
Yeah,
bad
yeah.
day. Yeah.
When you were eating that way, you in your book you mentioned that you developed degenerative disc disease.
Oh, yeah.
What I see most common in blood tests, and we've looked at thousands of them, is some form of anemia,
Yeah.
severe B12 deficiency, despite even if they're supplementing,
Yeah.
which, by the way, leads to psychosis, which
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
also is likely why the ideology. But anyway,
Yeah.
we'll get into that. You had degenerative disc disease. What else did you experience symptom-wise at the time?
So I also ended up with gastroparesis. So I destroyed my body's ability to create. I have to take betaine hydrochloride, so my stomach doesn't really produce hydrochloric acid anymore. So I've been taking that since God, I think maybe 2004. I'm still taking it. I need it every day. So that might be one of those permanent things as well.
Mm.
So, and I can explain how that happens for those who don't understand it, but it has to do with the blood sugar cycle,
And,
that you can in fact suppress your body's ability to
and
make
that's
hydrochloric
when
acid, and you can do it
people
forever.
say
So
people say I eat meat and I feel so bad. There's somebody in the comments who said that when I eat meat I feel so bad. It's because you don't have enough acid to.
don't,
Yeah.
because you wrecked it. And this is how. Every time you've got too much sugar in your blood, it's a biological emergency, and your body says, oh no, you're going to die. And that's true, because our brains especially can only exist in a really narrow range of blood sugar. So you've pushed it too high. So emergency, out comes the insulin from your pancreas. That's an emergency response. It's a very blunt instrument. So insulin's job is it gets through your bloodstream as fast as it can, and it grabs everything, shoves it out into the cells for storage, so that your blood sugar will now be at a level where you're going to survive it. The problem is, being a blunt instrument, it takes out too much. So now your blood sugar's too low.
Mm.
So now you have that terrible feeling where you're shaking and you're sweating and you feel like you're going to die if you don't put food in your mouth. And that's true, because now your blood sugar's too low. It's below the level that your brain needs. So now you're like, oh, I have to have something. I have to have something. And being a vegan, what you're going to eat is another round of carbohydrate. So in it comes more sugar, Now it's too high again. Oh no. And so the insulin response, and now we've got to turn. So that whole thing goes on. And, by the end of being a vegan, I was eating semi-constantly. I mean, it was like every 10 minutes I had to put something in my mouth. Completely insane. And you think that's normal because it doesn't happen the first day. It takes a few years. And then every year you do it, it gets a little bit worse, and you don't realize. But one of the other hormones that your body releases to take care of this problem is adrenaline. So adrenaline's job is to kick you into high gear because you're about to die, because there's a lion coming at you and you need to run or fight, punch it in the face, or, wrestle, whatever you're going to do. You need a lot of energy to your big muscles as fast as you can, which means you don't want to digest anything right now. Like every last bit of energy is going to go to your arms and your legs. So your body shuts down digestion so that all your energy can be used elsewhere. So this is why in times of like intense stress, people have things like diarrhea. Like, you hear that when, like people literally poop their pants when they're, soldiers in the army or something, like really horrible kinds of life-threatening experiences. That's a thing that happens. And that's why your body is like, get rid of it. No more food. You just need to fight for your life. So you do this over and over and over again, 3, 4, 6, 10 times a day. That's how your body does it, is it shuts down all of those enzymes and the various chemicals that you use to digest your food, the main one being hydrochloric acid. And so your body says, we're not doing that right now. No energy is going to digesting food. You're just going to live through this experience, and then we'll get back to talking about food. So you do that over and over again over many, many years, and you've permanently damaged your body's capacity to do that. And that's exactly what I did. And taking the betaine hydrochloride was an utter miracle. After feeling like nauseated for 15 years, I couldn't believe it. It was one of those like super easy fixes that like 3 days in, I was like, wow, I don't feel sick all the time. I just got to take this stuff. And so I don't know. It's definitely a trick I've passed on to other recovering vegans, especially, like the blood sugar problem people. It's like, just try this, try it for a few days. You will feel so much better. So I did that for sure. I did end up with 3 autoimmune diseases. So it started with, guess what? Hashimoto's. And I also have, well, that's the soy for sure. And then I also have psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. So that's no fun. I got those. The disc thing, the spine thing is probably the worst of it. I had some problems that got better. So like I had really, really dry skin. It was so dry it hurt. I mean, it would keep me up at night. It was so bad. And I just thought that was normal because it doesn't come on again in one day. It takes a few years to get to that point. But the first thing that I started eating when I was coming out of veganhood was eggs. That was like the easiest thing for me to decide was okay. And like day 3 of eating eggs, I woke up in a completely different skin. Like I don't even know how to describe what this is like, but when you've spent years with your arms and legs hurting every time you move them at all, and suddenly it was like, oh, wow, I can bend my arms and nothing hurts. And you just think, wow, what have I done? Like, that wasn't normal. And I thought it was. So that went away overnight. So there were things like that that just kind of evaporated the moment I had, a little animal fat in my diet. I also had
B vitamins in there. I mean, eggs
all
are
of it.
amazing.
Yeah, they're great, the vitamin D and the vitamin A and all that. I also absolutely had the depression, anxiety, the exhaustion, that whole sort of collection of nasty brain problems from not having anything to build a brain with, and that got dramatically better as well when I started to eat a more appropriate human diet. I also, of course, did the usual, messed up my reproductive organs from not having any animal fat. So that was like a big mystery for 20 years. Like, well, why don't I have menstrual periods? That seems like a normal thing for a woman to do, and I don't have them, and nobody could tell me anything about it. And of course, once I come out of being a vegan and do my own research about this, it becomes quite clear. The missing piece is, of course, that hormones are made from cholesterol, all of your hormones. Cholesterol is the mother substance. It's like the base that is used to make every last one of your hormones. And, your body has all kinds of fallback plans. There's a lot of resilience built into being alive. So if you don't have enough cholesterol, enough fat, to make those kinds of hormones, what your body says is, well, we'll make all the hormones you need to stay alive moment to moment, day by day. Clearly, you're half starved. No time to think about having a baby. So we're going to shut that down, and we'll only make the ones that we really need right now. You get some better food, you let us know, and we'll talk about having a baby. Until then, we're just going to make the hormones that you need right now. And that's the thing. So this happens to a lot of women who are vegan, a lot of women who eat just generally low-fat diets. Female athletes have this problem because their body fat ratio is way too low. It seems really obvious now, but at the time, I mean, I just was mystified. And that completely stabilized once I stopped being vegan, like dramatically so. And that was one of those like, wow, I am not making any of this up. I really did a number on myself. So I also ended up with uterine fibroids, and I had to have surgery and like that whole business as well. So
Yeah.
not any fun. All of that could have been avoided. So,
I think I am quite outspoken about this, and I do it not because I'm mean or want to get, some sort of reaction out of people. I do it because it's the only thing that humans notice. If I write a really great post about how choline affects the brain and why eggs are so important and how vegan diets, no one will read it and no one will notice it. But when I put up something like a photo or I get a lot of engagement, a lot of discussion. And it's not that I am inherently against veganism. It's just education. Like I just want to educate people so they can make more informed decisions, because I don't think it's the correct way to eat. And I get it all the time. Someone will comment and say, do you think that athletes can do well on a vegan diet? Like maybe some of them have done well for a year, but no, I don't think so. And how do you know what they eat every day?
Well, the other two things. One is that they have bodies that were not built by a vegan diet. They ate tons. They had normal diets when they were growing up. It might have been bad in some ways, like, the standard American diet, but there was meat and eggs and milk and whatever involved in building that body that they now have. They might decide as an adult, okay, I'm going to be a vegan now, but that body was not built. I've seen those children. I know how bad they look when they get to be teenagers. Like there's no way. Their teeth are an absolute mess. They're scrawny. They're never going to achieve their full human height that they would have. Like you can't, that's not going to happen. So, that's problem number one. And problem number two is that even if they're trying to be vegans now, being athletes, they're eating a lot of essentially industrially produced foods, like all those protein powders that might be made from
Frankenfoods, we call it.
Right. Yeah. Like that's not something you're going to go outside and hunt and bring home and eat. That doesn't exist outside of, industrial civilization. It's highly processed. It's made in a factory. You can't make it in your kitchen. You can't find it, out on, the forest or pull it out of a river. This is not something that you're going to stumble across in your backyard and eat. It's not a berry. It's not a fish. It's an industrially produced, like you say, a frankenfood. And that's what they're eating to build some muscle mass as vegan athletes. And it's not food.
Yeah. So, you mentioned some really important bits that I think people should understand about mental health, depression, anxiety, and physical health, because they are one, I believe. I don't think we can kind of separate the two and say, you're depressed, but it's not because you're unfit or because you're unhealthy. It's because it's probably a combination of all those things. And there are a couple of simple rules that we tell patients. One is the body wants to heal. You just have to give it the right inputs. And if it's not healing, likely you are giving it the wrong inputs. All right. Your central nervous system controls a lot of things that you have no direct input over, like your stress hormones, right? And your brain is primed for survival. It will prioritize itself and it will always try to survive. And it's not very good at looking into the future. It just wants to survive now. So if you don't have, and as a female, like the menstruation cycles and pregnancy, one of the biggest stresses is creating another human. And I see it, mums will come to us after the third pregnancy. They've experienced a dip in resources and they've never dug themselves out, and then another dip, then another dip. And by the third child, they are really, really unhealthy. And that's the brain opting for survival. You have to give your system more resources to heal. Not soy, not plants. Plants don't really nourish you that much. They might feed your gut microbiome and and do some good things, but like real nourishment. You mentioned the case of, I forget the name of the African tribe who pretty much drinks blood, drinks milk, and eats
Yeah.
meat.
Yep. Yeah.
That's nourishment.
That's nourishment. And there's lots of people like that in our ancestral history. So, yeah. Well, the thing to remember is that muscle meat contains anywhere from 10 to 100 times more nutrients than any plant you could name. And then the organ meats, again, 10 to 100 times more nutrients than the muscle meat. So that's where the real nutrients are. And we have moved so far away from this for most of us, in our culture, that unless you have like a real ethnicity where people are hanging on to their traditional foods, it's gone. I mean, I never ate organ meats when I was growing up. We had a liverwurst every once in a while, and that was it. And I have friends certainly who ate like chopped liver as kids, but that's about it. And I mean, that's what made us human, was eating things like animal brains. That's what let our brains expand. The good stuff, the dense stuff. I even see it with my dogs. When they eat in the morning, they will preferentially eat out any organ meats that are in there and the egg yolk. That's the first thing they eat. And then they'll move on to the muscle stuff. Like, they know. It's amazing to watch every single morning. It's the first thing they pull out of that dish.
Yeah. What's an average day of eating for you look like?
I eat like I guess basically like a keto kind of paleo diet. So, breakfast is usually broth and eggs, and then lunch is usually some kind of beef or fish, with some vegetables. Like, I'll have some salad at that point. And then I don't usually eat dinner because of the gastroparesis thing. I still get a stomach ache if I eat at night, but I'll have like my last sort of snack, sort of smallish meal at maybe 3 or 4 o'clock, and that'll be kind of more of the same. I'm not a big fruit eater. People I know who love fruit. I don't really get fruit. I just don't understand it. Like, why? I just am not hungry for fruit. I do like chocolate. That's my downfall. So it's, you try to keep that to a kind of dull roar, but if I'm going to eat a sugary thing, it's chocolate. So
Yeah.
that's pretty much, my thing. And I am lucky because I live in a rural area. So I have access to absolutely fabulous, like, grass-fed beef, really good quality eggs. I've had chickens and goats myself. I don't currently have those, but I have had all kinds of fowl, and then the goats too, which is a lot of fun. But I have access to, we actually have a cheese factory in my tiny little town. And I know, it's amazing. And there's nothing here except this cheese factory. And they are really committed to buying local grass-fed milk from, local dairies. And they have really, really good cheese. So I can go downtown and just get super good quality cheese, just like that. It's right there and it's really cheap. So
Amazing.
I'm very, very lucky. And I also live right on the coast, so there's a lot of seafood available that's harvested that day. I'm like 2 miles from the ocean, so it's really easy. So I know that I'm incredibly lucky, and all of that. A lot of people don't have access to anything like that, and I do. So,
I mean, you definitely wrote the book, I'm assuming, after you started to eat animals again.
Oh, yeah.
Because your mental acuity would have improved. In terms of those health conditions, and in particular, like the mental health, anxiety, depression, do you feel better eating protein, animals, fats?
Yeah, and I think for some of us, it's really dramatic. That I think once you've kind of done this to your brain, it's kind of semi-permanent. That it only takes a few hours for me of not eating a good chunk of kind of solid animal protein of some kind, and honestly, it starts coming back around the edges. I'll find myself feeling incredibly fragile and slightly depressed, and I'm sort of on the edge of the void. It's like I could so easily just push myself right over that and decide that everything is terrible. And Miss Bunny. So, and then it's like, oh, I just need to eat. Like, I know what's wrong. If I just eat an egg or a burger, everything will be fine. And generally, it is. So that's her tail. Why are we
She wants her owner back. Well,
oh, it's because somebody's driving down the driveway. I know why it is. Can you grab her a chew stick? Thank you. We'll make her be quiet. Here's your teal. She had surgery a few weeks ago, so I can't let her out yet. She's not quite ready for running. Yeah, she busted her cruciate ligament in the knee, which is a thing that especially large dogs do. So she had to have surgery. So she's over the worst of it, but she's not allowed to be free yet. I can't just let her out to run around. So
poor thing.
decides to have a bark session, I can't just throw her out the door.
Yeah.
Anyway, somebody has applied a chew stick, so now she's going to be.
She's fine. It's kind of like you and the egg, right?
It
You've
is like,
applied the egg.
apply the egg, you'll feel better. It's like, apply the chew stick. So she is right now eating they have bullies. I don't know. Do you have dogs? Are you into dogs at all?
Me, I don't have dogs at the moment. I grew up with a German Shepherd.
Oh, good.
My partner has a Doberman. Love dogs. I just don't have one at the moment.
Well,
Definitely.
she has a bully stick right now, and that'll keep her busy for 5 minutes. So
There you go. Yeah. We've got, 8,000, not a huge database, but we've got enough people that are really interested in nutrition that, your message matters. If you were to rewind 20, 25 years, and again, these are not words coming from me, so I don't want people to be on the page like, Marco, stop telling us to, because I say it all the time, and so I feel it loses its power.
yeah.
From somebody who has, because I've never been a vegan, right? But for somebody who has been a vegan for so long and written a book about it, which is a huge task, what would you say to yourself, and then what would you say to these, good people who are considering going down that route?
Well, you're not going to save animals. You're not going to save the planet. You're not going to feed hungry people, and you're not going to help your health. You will, in fact, do way more damage eating that diet to all of those things. In fact, none of it turns out to be true. And I would beg people, you don't have to believe me, but do more research before you get into this, because there's so much more information out there right now than when I was 16 years old and took this up. I really didn't know better. But now there's so much good stuff out there that will walk you through this, like how it is we can actually restore the planet. And it does not involve being a vegan. Agriculture is the worst thing that humans have done to the planet. This is not the diet of peace and sustainability and compassion. It's not. It's the worst thing. So, ask bigger questions, get the better information before you make this decision. You can still be somebody who cares very deeply about animals and the earth and human beings and how to have a better way, how to live a better way. All of that, those are the central questions to being alive right now, because our planet is really on the brink. So the values behind this are completely correct, but you have the wrong information. That's what I would say.
Yeah, just misguided, I feel.
Yes.
And I might add one there. Vote with your dollar and make effort to go and source your food. Like, don't just limit it to the local supermarket. Find a farmer, find somebody you can support, pay a little bit more. Do something meaningful with your money rather than just not eating meat. Because unfortunately, it doesn't work.
If they're doing the right thing, they've got permanent pasture everywhere. So they're sequestering carbon, they're making habitat for all kinds of birds and mammals, and they're helping to restore the local waterways. So there's fish are going to be happier, water tables being recharged, and then every single year they are sequestering carbon by building soil. That's the only way we're going to get that carbon out of the atmosphere, is by restoring grasslands of whatever kind. It is the only way forward. And every time you buy beef or whatever from a grass-based farm, you are doing that. You are helping in that process. So try to understand what I just said. There's so much good research out there right now, but I'm telling you the truth about this. This is our hope. So spend your dollars wisely, because you can help be part of the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if people want to, if you're a patient of ours and you're watching this, whether live or the replay, and you want the book, just let me know and we'll send you a copy. Otherwise, if people want to read more of what you do, post regularly, do you do any emails or anything like that at the moment?
I'm on Facebook, and you can almost go to my website and look at my books or whatever. I'm easy to get a hold of.
Awesome. Yeah, I was really surprised that you even responded to me. I remember just shooting the message being like, I'll just try it. But the book really did have a big impact on me and a lot of our patients. So I appreciate it. There's a few staple books that I send to people. One of them is The Vegetarian Myth. Another one is Lost Connections by Johan Hari, which is about mental health, anxiety, and a few others, but those two are the biggest ones. So if you're a patient, we'll send it over to you complimentary. Otherwise, if you haven't read The Vegetarian Myth, I couldn't recommend it more. It's Absolutely awesome. Thanks for doing this.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
We'll hopefully do it again sometime
Sure.
and talk about other issues like autoimmune. But I think we covered some good stuff today, and I think people can take away with some knowledge. And good luck with the elections.
Yeah, it'll be over soon.
Yeah. All right, Leah. Thank you very much.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.